Hello and welcome back to Fire Emblem Last Promise 0% Growth Slow Turn Count playthrough. This video will be tackling both Chapter 17 and 17X. Chapter 17, immediately off the rip, begins with us having access to Lyam. Lyam is a convoy and he functions identically to how Merlinus does in FE7. He can be deployed in every single chapter, and every chapter he survives raises his level. Once he reaches level 20, he'll promote and he gains the ability to move. He's pretty much irrelevant beyond providing us access to the convoy, but in a couple of chapters, he will use his ability to move to bait enemies around, and be able to help us transfer a couple items to a new unit that joins in a couple of chapters. The start of this chapter is primarily focused on us getting access to that treasure room that you see on screen, and chipping down these enemies. The main thing is that Asch has the Dragon Axe, so he can punch through these generals. These generals are just fast enough that he can't double them with Steel Axe, but he's able to do so with with the Dragon Axe, and it has just enough might that Emma, after weakening him with fire, can combine with him to kill. We got a new unit as well. His name is Mark. Mark is a unit that has, among other things, B rank axes, 13 strength, and 10 speed. The primary use of this is that he's able to throw around hand axes to help clear the way in this chapter, which is at least nice because it means he can help kill weakened fighters, weakened mages, and soldiers. It's not the biggest praise for him, but hey. He also is a rare infantry unit that is able to rescue Anakin both before and after promotion, though that doesn't come up. I mention that because Anakin's promotion jumps him to 9 Constitution after he promotes in Chapter 18, which means that a couple of units that can rescue him beforehand no longer can, and he's able to rescue a couple of units that he would otherwise be able to rescue him. Among these is a unit named Shadow, who joins in a couple of chapters, and this is relevant and it's worth talking about immediately, because I think it's funny. His promotion is in after Chapter 18, so I figured I might as well talk about it now while it's still somewhat relevant. You can see Mark's combat coming into play on this turn. At the start of this chapter, Kellic and Sean are thrown into what I've called the hallway to Gay Baby Jail. The reason for this is because they need to go rescue Siegfried, and that also means that there's a bunch of enemies that are practically earmarked for Kellic's experience gain. There's a couple of mages as well that will harass them over the walls, and I actually have to bait them somewhat carefully. Kellic is able to withstand multiple rounds of combat from them, whereas Sean can only take one hit at this point. He's back with the exact same stats he had at the end of Siegfried mode, which means that he's already level 11, and now he's level 12. He'd be able to reach level 10 if he was level 9 and was able to kill that mercenary, but as it turns out, it's completely fine. He already reached level 11 in Siegfried mode, but hey, there's at least one kill earmarked for him. Kellic also has multiple enemies that he's able to kill and ship, and having him weaken those mages over the wall is actually somewhat relevant. We need those mages to be weakened so that Asch is able to kill them in one hit with the hand axe for extra reliability, even though he's already pretty likely to be able to do so anyway. The other reason we need those mages weakened is that we're able to kill them in a single hit with Ben later on with the Steel Lance or with the Axe Reaver, and the same thing is helpful for Karina. Sean is able to bait one of the mages and take one attack on the first enemy phase, which is nice because it means that mages moved upwards, so it actually doesn't go out of the way to attack Kellic immediately. Kellic is also just fast enough to not get doubled by any of those enemies, double some of the enemies that are blocking his way to Siegfried, and also, notably, not double the mages, because if he did, he'd probably be dead. If he did double one of the mages, we just have Sean in the way, so that one of them would go for Sean, one of them would go for Kellic, and they wouldn't be at risk of dying. Worth talking about are the treasures in this part of the map. After we weaken this general with both Shuuda and Emma, Shuuda ends up getting a low % crit to weaken this general, which isn't necessary, but it's nice. That general would be at exactly 8 HP without the crit, which is in fact just enough for Tekun with the lancereaver to be able to finish the general off, due to his higher strength than Shuuda. The crit isn't necessary, but it does at least save us a use of the lancereaver, and it means that Tekun has literally 0 chance of dying throughout this chapter because he doesn't risk the 19% counter hit. Kellic on this enemy phase has to dodge either the fighter at 30% hit or the mage at 78% hit, and the fighter is significantly easier to dodge. There are 6 treasure chests on this chapter, as I've already mentioned, and we get 4 of them. Among these items is a short bow and a knight crest at the bottom. We don't use the knight crest anymore, but we still get it because it's extra cash. At the top, there's a treasure room that the shaman just blocked the doorway to. In those 4 chests in there is a guiding ring, a hammer, an armor slayer, and an elf fire. I'll leave it as an exercise to the viewer to guess which ones we end up getting from that chest. There's also a secret shop in the hallway that Kellic and Sean are in. In those secret shops, there are, among other things, and elixirs, and halberds. We end up mainly buying those because we don't need any of the other items in there. Among those is an air caliber tome, and I suppose I should talk about it in case anyone gets fooled by it. It says it's effective against the wings of Pegasi, and that is exactly what it does. There are no enemy Pegasi left after this point in the game, so it does effective damage to a class that we never fight again. If it was effective against Wyverns, it'd be pretty good for Sia and Itsuki in a growth playthrough, and especially Emma if she's grinded up to that rank to use it. Especially in Chapter 20, because that map is full of flying enemies. But as it turns out, it's full of an enemy type we no longer fight, so yeah. We have Emma carrying Asch, and she's going to get danced by Anakin. She needs to be able to throw Asch into the pillars so that he can start working on shipping down the enemy force that is going to come down and mob us. Asch doesn't have S-rank axes yet, which means that he's going to be fighting against some decently inaccurate attacks against some mercenaries, but he doesn't really need to hit any of them due to the fact that we have multiple contingencies to deal with them. What he does need, though, is to survive, obviously. We also use our ability to rescue Anakin with Eduardo, and specifically Zack, to bring Anakin a few steps forward as well, so he's able to dance Emma next turn. I've mentioned Emma and Ben's ridiculous growths before, and they also have a support that they've been working on building a little bit in the next couple of chapters. They'll reach it in Chapter 21. Emma also has a support with the next unit that we're going to be getting technically in this chapter. His name is Lyam, and he's currently on the throne. A lot of the turns that are left in this chapter are just going to be us punching up through the throne room and adopting formations to have Asch and Karina and Ben get a lot of combat in to get their lance and axe ranks up, respectively. So after this enemy phase, I'm going to be spending a lot of time talking about Lyam because, as I've said in other recordings of this chapter, he is the face of my channel for a reason. Asch is going to be able to fight multiple mages on this enemy phase, and while he has to dodge either that mage or the shaman, both of which have 56 and 44 hit on him, and he has to dodge one of them, he's able to get mended by Emma, so he's able to survive regardless of what happens, as long as he dodges one. It's time to talk about Lyam. Lyam is one of the primary units that is going to be used in every single chapter pretty much after he joins. He has 42 HP, 17 strength, 15 skill, 16 speed, 12 luck, 13 defense, 10 res, and 11 constitution, so he has 14-8 as a mounted unit. I just said he's a mounted unit, and he uses both swords and bows, which are some of the better weapon types in this game. The only real flaw with his weapon ranks is that he doesn't have access to lances. He has an A rank in both swords and bows, meaning he can use literally every single sword we care about that is accessible to non-sword master classes, and he has access to every single bow that we'll ever care about. He's going to hit S-rank bows. It's not an if, it's a when. And in this run, it ended up being, instead of Chapter 19, Chapter 19X, which is actually exactly perfectly timed, because it means that he doesn't break any additional uses of the short bow to push ahead super quickly, and it means he still has S-rank bows for the cluster that is Chapter 20, which improves the reliability of one of the least reliable chapters in this playthrough already. We have access to the Killer Bow and a Killing Edge already, and he has A ranks, as I said, in both swords and bows, and things keep getting better for him. 17 strength is a really important benchmark because it means that a lot of magical enemies will always die to him using either a Brave Bow, after they take a little tiny bit of chip damage from someone like a spear using Paladin, or he'll be able to kill them with a Killer Bow crit. This also means that once we get access to Killer Longbows, he'll be able to use those incredibly effectively as well. During my rant, I just want to point out that Ben just hit B-rank lances, even though we've only had him for a chapter and a half. Other things worth praising about Lyam is, again, his 17 strength. It's really high. He's able to one-shot some enemies at base in Chapter 27, over the wall, including Valkyries that are really annoying to fight otherwise. He needs a Killer Bow crit with them, and his accuracy wouldn't be the best, but hey. He also has supports with Emma and Alice, and in a Groats playthrough, these are really worth talking about. Also in a Groats playthrough, there's a bug with him. I forget exactly how it works, but in some emulators with some versions of the game, if he were to fight an enemy on enemy phase and either not kill them or kill them, he would gain a full level up during enemy phase. Even though his growths aren't fantastic, he does have 15 levels to grow, and he has 80% HP, 40% strength, and 55% speed. This means that his stats, while they're not always going to be fantastic, they're going to be ridiculously high, especially if you're willing to take advantage of this. What that means is that he's able to roll into Chapter 19 and Chapter 20 as a level 20 ranger with ridiculously high stats that you're absolutely not meant to have for a really long time. It's very funny, and while it's not something I would recommend taking advantage of, it's something that is worth mentioning as something he is able to do. There's also just more things to talk about with him. We got a pair of boots back in Chapter 12, and we're getting an energy ring in Chapter 19, and both of them are going to end up going on him. The energy ring means that he's able to one-shot a boss later on with a killer bow crit, and it also means that the boss of Chapter 19 is able to be one-shot by him using a killer bow crit as well. It's kind of ridiculous. In the previous run, I had already blown through most of the killer bow by this point, in both with Zack in the previous chapter and this chapter, and the main reason I bought the iron bow was to save uses on it for Lyam, because it meant that having more uses of a killer bow are ridiculously helpful for killing things that are difficult to fight, like promoted enemies, especially considering that most of the enemies we're going to be fighting are promoted and scary. Also worth talking about is his starting inventory, because yet there's more things to praise with him. He brings a silver sword, a silver bow, an elixir, and a hero crest with him. That's S-rank axes on Asch, so every single attack he's going to be doing moving forward is going to have +5 hit and crit. Having a silver sword is incredibly useful because it means he has a tool that he can always use at one range to kill things for a very long time. It also means that Shuuda, once he promotes, will have access to a consistent one-range weapon he can double with to kill enemies without needing to rely on crits. It also means that Tekun has access to a silver sword before you'd get another one. Having access to the hero crest also means that Shuuda or Tekun is able to promote for the next chapter, which is going to be Tekun in this case. The elixir is also nice because we're running somewhat low on those, and we just got a convoy to be able to hold access to healing items. We've had to toss a few already to make room for better items like a silver lance. There are a couple of downsides with Lyam. Notably, he's a ranger. He's not a nomadic trooper. Among other things, this means he has one less move than a promoted Storm and promoted Haas. It also means that he doesn't have the beneficial terrain penalties those two have. He's still able to river walk just like they are, but that's not super beneficial because it's not really relevant for TLP. What that does mean is that he doesn't get the additional terrain cost reduction in forests, and that one actually does come up a little bit. He gets the boots either way to make up for it because he's the only competent mounted combat unit we have for quite a while, and at the very least it already starts saving turns because we don't have access to a boots flyer like Lyam or Karina who would in a Groats playthrough be able to one-round a lot of enemies at 1-2 range. We just don't have access to that at any real point in this run. We always have to rely on crits, and Lyam is the best option we have to do generic one-range combat. Another thing that's worth commenting on is that short bows are his only access to 1-2 range that doesn't restrict other units and that doesn't completely cut into his strength. We get access to a wind sword in Chapter 23, but that damage formula has never been good for units. Wind swords have your strength and then use that hitting on res, and they also can't crit. His strength at 19 is going to be great, but it also means that his strength is getting cut in half down to 9, and then the low might of the wind sword is being used. It's effective against flyers, but it's only 2x effective, so it's not really that impactful, especially considering we don't really fight any flyers past the point we get the wind sword. What is nice, though, is that by having access to bows and swords, he has access to 1 range, 1 to 2 range, 2 range, and 2 to 3 range, all with respective amounts of power and crit that he can scale up at any point in time due to his perfect weapon ranks. What this means is that he's really good at AI manip. If we want him to be able to scare away enemies from attacking at 1 range, we equip a Killing Edge or Silver Sword on him. If we want him to bait enemies to attack him at 1 range, we equip any type of bow that isn't a short bow. If we want enemies to be afraid of him because he can always counter, we give him a short bow. If we want enemies to be able to go for him, but we want to be able to hit enemies through two tile-thick walls, or just past a wall, we give him a longbow or a bloody rifle, which is a killer longbow. There are so many things worth talking about with this unit, but unfortunately I do have to cut myself short to answer the question that I asked in the start of the video. The items that we end up picking up from this treasure room are the hammer and the armor slayer, primarily because they're in chests next to each other. We could, in theory, get 3 of those items by using one of the wyverns to pass the chest key between Lyam and Asch to get the chests, but it's not really that worth it, especially considering the guiding ring isn't going to end up being used and the L-Fire would just be money, because not a single one of our units even reaches C-rank tomes. It also means that we're able to have Karina get more lance rank, and we're able to have Ben get an extra kill with an axe reaver. They're very close to the lance rank benchmarks by the end of this chapter, but hey, every little bit helps, especially when I want them to hit S rank eventually. We killed the Horse Slayer soldier for no real reason. I didn't comment on this guy, but he went for Emma. Emma's speed is decent, even though her luck is pretty terrible, so her evasion rate against that guy was pretty alright. With everything being said and my rant about Lyam done, that is Chapter 17 cleared in 7 turns.
Dad.
Up next is going to be Chapter 17X, a guidance chapter that I have no idea as to the requirements to unlock.
Nothing.
This chapter doesn't have anything worth talking about in terms of villages or rewards, but because we have to go here to do the all chapters mandate that I said, we obviously have to visit it. And even if we didn't have to visit it, there's a guidance chapter later on that uses and requires outright one of the items we get from this chapter that we wouldn't be able to clear and we literally cannot skip otherwise. So as a result, we'd be going to this chapter either way, because it's a chapter we couldn't clear without the reward from it. This is the only time I show the full preps of any chapter. I think. We undeploy Kellic and Sean because they're useless in this chapter, and deploy Lyam and Tekun exactly as I said in that order. The reason we do this is just because it's the easiest way to get them in the positions without having to swap spaces on the map. We do Liam's inventory second, and we promote Tekun first. After we promote Tekun, we have to reset. The important things about this promotion are the plus 5 HP and plus 2 to strength, alongside a decent chunk of weapon experience. The main benefit of the plus 2 to strength is that he's able to hit one-shot thresholds in this chapter that the other units that I considered using for it wouldn't be able to reach, including Shuuda. He's also just faster than Shuuda in general. He has more con. Shuuda would have to double crit some of the enemies, whereas Tekun is able to do so once, with an additional crit bonus, with higher skill, which is the reason why he got promoted first. After this, we prepare Liam's inventory. If we had access to a steel bow, we'd use it instead of the silver bow, but we don't, so he has to work with the silver bow for now. There's an archer he has to one round at 2 range, and he has to use either a steel bow or silver bow to do it, but as I said, we don't have a steel bow, and I'd rather not blow uses of the killer bow on something so trivial. We deploy a Liuk because there's no real reason not to, and then we get on to this chapter. Anakin's stuck in a really bad position where he'd be attacked by 3 enemies, if not 4, if we don't kill one of them, and he'd just die on turn 1 unless we give him some extra health. We burn some RN so we can conserve a use of the Killing Edge by having Tekun use the Emblem Blade instead of the Killing Edge there. We also might have been able to use an Iron Bow to kill that archer, but there's no real reason to conserve uses of the Silver Bow. We never fully break any of the silver weapons we pick up in this playthrough because most of the time we're just going to be relying on killers instead, and we have no real reason to just not break them out, especially when they're able to just show off how shiny and cool they are. The boss of this chapter drops a weapon that I want to start talking about now. It's called the Onigiri. It has the same Luna effect as the spell, well, Luna from FE7, and it's a sword that is A rank and locked specifically to Sword Masters and promoted Kellic. I guess Myrmidons could also use it, but like, there's not a single Myrmidon left in the game, especially considering we killed one of the ones we'd otherwise be able to recruit due to the Aaron Samson nature of Logan and Asch. During enemy phase, Anakin had to dodge one of those attacks from one of the fighter or pirate. Because he cannot possibly kill either of those enemies, we're locked to a 2 turn of this chapter. A 3 turn of this chapter, which is fine. If he was able to kill one of those 2, Liam would be able to potentially get in risk in enemy phase crit the boss, but we don't really want to do that. Also worth talking about with the Onigiri is its really low hit. It is 45% hit and no innate crit, which makes it just worse than FE7 Luna. There's also a version of the Lunatome called Solstice in this game. It has no innate crit and has worse hit than FE7 Luna, which is a good thing because some enemies end up with it. We end up getting 2 copies of it because I buy one on accident. Because Anakin hit the pirate with his counterattack, it means Lyam does not need a crit to clear the pirate out with a short bow, which is nice because that's the only real way he'd be able to do it if he didn't get the counter hit. After Anakin dances Lyam, we're able to burn some additional RN so that he's able to one-shot Zoro with a killer bow crit. I mentioned that Lyam gets the energy ring and that directly saves turns. This is a part of the game where having access to the extra energy ring from Karina doesn't really help Lyam out much. It would allow him to get some extra 1 rounds with the short bow without needing to rely on crits, but hey. I promise I'm done rambling about Lyam and how cool he is. You will not be dealing with that for the rest of the playthrough. He is the face of my channel for a reason. We burned our Rens so we'd be able to use the Iron Blade instead of the Killing Edge where possible, because when we have the ability to use an infinite use weapon and still get a kill, or a durability limited weapon and get a kill, we'd always prioritize using the infinite use weapon. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time for Chapter 18, which is at least a little bit more interesting. Goodbye!